As the sun dipped below the horizon, Margaret's father gathered his things, offering his daughter a reassuring smile. "You'll be fine, honey. I'll be back soon," he promised gently. She nodded, but her eyes drifted past him toward the closed bedroom door. For months now, he'd shared that room with Jessica, his new wife, a woman who showed Margaret no kindness. When her father wasn't around, Jessica's whispers were laced with hurtful words, criticizing everything from her appearance to her character. Yet, Margaret never mentioned it to her father. Jessica had brought him joy and comfort after the loss of his beloved wife, and Margaret didn't want to be the one to ruin his happiness. Blissfully unaware of Jessica's behavior, her father hugged her tightly, kissed Jessica goodbye, and headed off on his business trip. He missed the fleeting, unreadable look Jessica cast at Margaret as he left, a cold expression that made Margaret shrink in discomfort. A few days later, Jessica proposed a walk in the nearby forest. "Just the two of us, a little secret outing," she coaxed with an unusually gentle tone. Margaret felt a flicker of suspicion. The forest was chilly this time of year, and there wasn't much to do in it, but Jessica's words left her with little choice. Reluctantly, she agreed, falling silent as she followed her stepmother down the winding forest path. At first, Margaret allowed herself to relax. Jessica seemed pleasant enough, telling her animated stories about her youth, laughing lightly as they walked. Margaret found herself momentarily caught up in the tales, unaware of how far they had wandered off the main path. But as the sun sank lower, Jessica's cheerful smile took on a chilling quality, and her tone grew sharper. When they stopped, Jessica leaned close, her voice suddenly cold and her eyes gleaming with malice. "Listen carefully, girl," Jessica whispered. "I'll go back alone and tell your father you ran away. He'll search, but of course, we won't find you. In time, he'll accept it, and I'll comfort him. Then we'll have our own children, and you'll be forgotten." Jessica's lips curled into a smirk as she finished. Before Margaret could process Jessica's words, a sharp blow to the back of her head sent her world spinning. She stumbled and collapsed, her vision fading as darkness overtook her. Meanwhile, a young she-wolf was prowling nearby, her instincts alert as the forest quieted. In the fading light, she caught the faint sound of a muffled cry, a signal of distress. Her ears perked up, her senses honing in on the scent of a child, a human cub, lost and alone in the woods. Compelled by an instinct to protect, the she-wolf approached, padding softly through the underbrush. When she found Margaret lying there, trembling and cold, she sensed the girl's vulnerability and fear. The she-wolf circled Margaret cautiously, her black eyes radiating a calm, protective strength as if to assure her, "You're safe with me." As Margaret regained her senses, she felt the warmth of the she-wolf's body next to hers, and relief flooded over her. In that moment, Margaret knew that her strange rescuer had no intention of harm. She clung to the she-wolf's warmth, her fear melting away, replaced by a deep gratitude. Jessica drove them to the edge of the dense pine forest, parking the car before they began their walk into the wilderness. Margaret followed in silence, her unease growing with each step. At first, Margaret found herself relaxing as Jessica filled the air with cheerful stories from her youth. Her laughter sounded bright, and her animated tales seemed to ease Margaret's tension. She became so absorbed that she didn't notice when the path faded, nor did she catch the subtle shift in Jessica's smile from friendly to something darker. "Listen closely, girl." Jessica's voice suddenly took on a sharp edge as she bent down to Margaret, her eyes glinting with malice. "Here's what's going to happen. I'll go back alone and tell your father that you suddenly started acting strangely and ran off, no matter how hard I tried to stop you. We'll search for a while, but when we don't find you, I'll console him, and soon we'll have children of our own. How does that sound?" She grinned, and before Margaret could react, a sharp blow to the back of her head sent her world spiraling into darkness. As dusk enveloped the forest, a young she-wolf emerged from her den, gliding silently through the trees on her nightly hunt. In the midst of the quiet, she picked up a faint, distressed cry. Her ears pricked, her instincts sharp as she caught the scent of a human child, a lost little girl. A wave of protectiveness washed over the she-wolf, compelling her to seek out the source of the sound. Following the scent and the soft whimper, the she-wolf navigated the underbrush until she came upon the child, lying motionless on the forest floor. Margaret's eyes fluttered open, wide with fear, her body tense and trembling. The she-wolf approached cautiously, each step measured, her presence calm and unthreatening. She sensed the girl's vulnerability, her need for comfort and safety. In that fragile moment, the she-wolf seemed to convey a silent promise, a pledge of protection. There, amid the vast, shadowed forest, a connection blossomed between them, driven by the primal instincts of survival and trust. The she-wolf, fierce and maternal, would guard the child, shielding her in the heart of the wilderness. The she-wolf nestled close to Margaret, sensing her feverish shivers and shallow breaths. She gently licked the girl's face as if to wipe away the sticky pine needles, offering comfort in her quiet, calming way. Wrapping her warm body around Margaret like a soft blanket, the she-wolf's black eyes radiated a maternal peace that seemed to say, "You're safe now." At first, Margaret's fear and anxiety surged. She was wary of the creature lying beside her, but as her mind cleared, she felt a deep sense of relief and gratitude, realizing that the she-wolf intended no harm. The warmth of her unlikely guardian was soothing, and Margaret's heartbeat gradually steadied. When she regained a bit of strength, the she-wolf seemed to sense it. With a gentle nudge of her paw, she encouraged Margaret to rise, as though guiding her onward. The she-wolf, sensing Margaret's renewed strength, knew it was time to lead her back to safety. Together, they embarked on a slow journey through the dense forest, carefully navigating rocks and roots. The she-wolf was ever attentive, her senses heightened as she guided Margaret with the patience of a protective guardian. Finally, they emerged at the forest's edge, where the soft glow of village lights shone through the trees. With a final gentle nudge, the she-wolf urged Margaret toward the lights, silently reassuring her with one last look. Margaret turned back, but the she-wolf had already disappeared into the shadows of the woods. Drawing on her newfound courage, Margaret approached the nearest house and knocked timidly. The door swung open, revealing a cozy, inviting warmth. The people welcomed her in without hesitation, wrapping her in blankets by the fireplace and offering her a steaming bowl of soup. As warmth seeped back into her limbs, her fear melted away. After a while, one of the kind strangers handed her a phone. With trembling fingers, Margaret dialed her father's number, her voice small yet hopeful. Hearing his voice on the other end made her heart leap, and tears welled up in her eyes. She was safe, surrounded by warmth and kindness, knowing she would soon be reunited with her father. The mysterious she-wolf had not only saved Margaret's life, but had guided her back to the safety of the human world. She was a silent protector from the wild, appearing just when Margaret needed her most, leaving a lasting imprint of courage, kindness, and the resilience of nature's bonds. Before his daughter even called, an unshakable feeling of dread consumed Thomas, as though he instinctively sensed something terrible had happened. Unable to ignore the anxiety any longer, he abandoned his business trip and turned his car around, racing back home. When he arrived, he found Jessica waiting for him, her face tear-streaked as she spun a story of panic and worry. She claimed Margaret had run away and insisted she had searched everywhere without success. The words hit Thomas like a blow, filling him with equal parts terror and rage. Fighting to control his emotions, Thomas ordered Jessica to stay by the phone while he immediately called friends, neighbors, and the police. His hands shook as he explained the situation, his voice cracking under the weight of his fear. Just as he was about to make another call, the phone rang, a miracle. Picking up, he heard the faint but familiar voice of his daughter. "Dad, it's me?" Margaret's voice wavered, a mixture of exhaustion and relief. "Aunt Jessica, she left me in the forest." The truth struck Thomas like a lightning bolt. Without hesitation, he assured her he was coming and ran to the car, determination hardening his resolve. But first, he turned to confront Jessica, his eyes blazing with fury. "When I get back," he spat, his voice seething with anger, "I don't want to see you here. Stay away from my daughter." Jessica's face turned pale, her lies exposed. Speechless, she shrank back, unable to mount a defiance as Thomas stormed out, leaving her behind. As he drove along the dark, winding road, he kept the phone close, listening to Margaret's story. In a trembling voice, she described how Jessica had led her deep into the forest and abandoned her. But as the story continued, her tone shifted, taking on a sense of wonder. She spoke of a miraculous rescuer, a she-wolf who had appeared as night fell, curling around her to keep her warm, sharing her body heat and warding off the bitter cold. Margaret's gratitude for this unexpected protector was clear, filling Thomas with a blend of sorrow and deep admiration for the creature who had saved his daughter. The forest loomed closer as he drove, his heart swelling with a fierce mix of relief and gratitude. When he reached the village where Margaret had found shelter, he spotted a shadowy figure watching from the tree line, a large, gray wolf. The sight struck Thomas, and he knew instantly it was the she-wolf, watching over his daughter one last time. Filled with emotion, he silently thanked the wolf, marveling at the kindness of a creature that could have been dangerous yet had chosen to protect. As he reunited with Margaret, holding her tightly, he silently vowed to never let anything come between them again. In that moment, the wolf's act of compassion and courage became a lasting bond between father and daughter, a story that would live in their hearts, reminding them of the unexpected allies that can arise in times of need. Years later, as Thomas prepared to move in with his son, he often reflected on that remarkable day and the selfless act of the wolf who had saved his daughter. On quiet walks through the forest, he would occasionally catch sight of her, a lone gray figure darting gracefully between the trees, a powerful reminder of the day his family was rescued by an unlikely hero. Driving toward the village that evening, his headlights had cut through a dense fog, revealing a silhouette at the edge of the trees. His heart skipped a beat. Standing in the shadows, a large she-wolf looked back at him, her calm, watchful eyes holding his gaze. It was as if she recognized him, a silent understanding passing between them. Thomas felt an overwhelming rush of gratitude as he slowed the car, taking in the sight of the noble creature who had guided his daughter safely back from the depths of the forest. In that stillness, Thomas knew without a doubt this was the same wolf Margaret had spoken of, the one who had shared her warmth and watched over her during that dark, lonely night. The wolf's gaze held a quiet wisdom, a depth of compassion that belied her wild nature. She had risked her own safety for his daughter, showing an empathy he had rarely seen even among humans. "Thank you," Thomas whispered, his voice barely audible, yet somehow sensing she understood. For a few precious moments, they held each other's gaze, an unspoken bond forming between them, a rare connection between man and animal that transcended words. With a heavy but grateful heart, Thomas turned back to the road, his thoughts lingering on the encounter. He felt a newfound respect for the wilderness and the surprising allies it harbored. As he drove away, he made a quiet vow to share this story with Margaret, to tell her about the wolf who had stood guard over her like a guardian angel in the form of a wild creature. In his heart, he resolved to honor the she-wolf's compassion, holding close the memory of this extraordinary act of kindness from a being many would simply fear or misunderstand. This moment would stay with Thomas for the rest of his life, a story he would cherish and share with his grandchildren as a testament to the remarkable connections that could exist between humans and the natural world. Each glimpse of the wolf in the years that followed became a beautiful reminder of the day his family was saved, proof that sometimes the most unlikely protectors emerge in life's darkest moments, showing that even the wildest of creatures possess a boundless capacity for kindness.